You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. We're the show that tries to give you some bite-sized ideas for ways to be a better leader, business owner, or influencer. Today, I've got a good friend and colleague. He's been on the show before. His name is Rich Hall. He is a certified exit planner. So we today are going to focus on business owners who may be thinking about that life-changing moment of selling or exiting your business. And Rich, with that, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug, thanks for having us and looking forward to chatting again.
Yeah, you bet. So since we last spoke, Rich has done a whole lot of work. He has earned the designation as a certified exit planning advisor, and he has really been in his own laboratory, really strategizing and putting some great plans and tools together. So Rich, let's just maybe get real simple. Back to my intro, common sense, bite-sized ideas. What does an exit planner do for people?
Well, actually, Doug, the value of an exit planner is that when business owners are thinking about some form of a transition, and a lot of people in the industry call it an exit, but it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to sell your company to somebody else. A lot of different ways, and we could, drill in a little bit further on that. But the stats show that a company that goes straight without preparation or planning and markets to sell, only about 30% of those businesses end up in a successful sale, which means 70% don't sell. And just as scary, family-owned businesses that look to transition to the second generation, only about 20% of those are successful long-term. So, those statistics are horrible for business owners.
Scary. Yeah, scary.
Yeah. And I've validated those myself.
20, 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of business owners. And so what a certified exit planner does is they'll go upstream, say a year or two, and work with the business owner, assess the business, assess the owner's goals. And we can deal in further with that because that's the most important thing that people live out. They always look at the value of the business itself. That's not the most important. It's what does the owner want? What's their personal and financial goals and goals for the business? And then we work with them to assess the business. We then come up with a valuation of the business and how that assessment impacts the valuation. And then the outcome of that is a game plan that whether it's us or the business owner works with to start preparing their business for a more successful exit.
Well, and I know we've spoken about this on this show before, and I've had other guests that have talked about this. Often what happens, the owner founder who has been, this business is his baby. It's part of his family. It's his left arm, and I'm sorry, folks, I'm guilty. I said his. It could be ladies, too. We got a lot of very successful female entrepreneurs out there, so no disrespect to them. But the point is the owner-founders worked hard to build this thing up. And often what ends up happening when they do think about the exit, if they're not going to hand it off to a generational succession, they get a value in their mind. Their best friend told them something, or somebody that probably is no more qualified to do valuation than anything gives them a number, and it gets locked in their head. And they go to market, and they're unpleasantly surprised that what the market's telling them is potentially half of that number.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. And so, I guess I'll start there. So what do you say to the owner that might be contemplating the exit? What should he be thinking about value of the business before a commitment is made to post for exit?
So there's a couple of things probably the most important thing from the business owner's perspective is to change the perspective of the business from, say, their baby or their, this is all of their entity and, themselves.
Their identity. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's their identity is you have to start looking at the business from a buyer's perspective. What would someone want, or what would someone pay for it? And then probably one of the key terms is called transferable value. And where that's important is, let me give the example. You've got a gentleman that's run a business for 25 years, and it's a good income generating business, and they've done great with it. In their mind, that business owner says, hey, if this business has been successful for me, it's got to be worth a lot of money. And I've seen scenarios where I'd talk to them and I said, your business won't sell. Nobody's going to buy it. And they're shocked. But then you can walk through 5 or 6 things right off the top that says, wait, if you are exited out of the business, even if there's plans for you to hang around afterwards, there's aspects of some businesses that just won't sell.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the kind of things that you have to get the owner to start changing their perspective about the business. And once they do, and they come to grips with that, then you can start analyzing it as an asset, not unlike a home, right? You get ready to sell a home, and hey, you may be accustomed to the crack in the wall, and you may have put a carpet over the problem in the floor, and the kitchen may be outdated, but hey, it works fine for me, and you like it. You got to put on a great coat of paint. You got to take care of any structural issues, any cracks, foundations. And it's very similar. And that's part of what we do, is do a full assessment of the business. And it's very in-depth in all areas, so that we're able to identify what those items are and see if it would be a risk to the sale.
Right. Well, one of the first markers, I think, of that inability to have transferable wealth, I tell the story. I've got a dear friend that was a career-long pet vet, veterinary medicine doctor, had a very successful practice, lived a great life because of it. And he got to the life stage where he wanted to stop going in every day and just, cash out and go. And he quickly learned that because he was the practice, there was no sellable value there. And he said, yeah, but I got this customer book. I got all these people that, I'll transition. And the quick answer is, those people like you. You could be working out of your garage and they would probably bring their pet to you. So, he did end up a very sad reality. He basically sold his equipment for salvage value, and that was the end of it. That was pretty much all he got from it.
You bring up a great point, because examples that we see a lot, especially with single owner type environments, is the owner, through the years, and the strength of their personality, their relationships, they may have gone and gotten that big, client or supplier. And then, hey, they're also golf buddies on the weekend. And what ends up happening is that relationship is really with the owner. Now, you can overcome that given time. And I advise clients, when I see that as an example, and it's a little bit of a fear factor, but I tell them, say, listen, if something happens to you, that relationship's gone. So they're just going to open up the RFP or vendor process, and you may be out. But what if you hire somebody and bring them in? Could be a VP of sales, could be relationship management, whatever, and slowly start transitioning that relationship over. So it's about the company and not you as the owner. I said, you can get there, but you need that 2 to 3 years in advance, like we're talking about, to do so. Try it last minute. There's not much that can be done. And then you fall into that 70% or 80% that don't sell.
So that's a great segue, Rich, for the idea of what exit planning is all about. If again, we're back to the person who thinks they want to exit their business, if they call an advisor like you to come in, not only do you give them the current state valuation, but you could give them some ideas on areas they could improve that could turn the dial maybe half an X or 2X or 3X, whatever that value might be, just by making some direct, meaningful adjustments. And I think of things like a lot of companies operate without a system. They take orders on sticky notes, and the office manager has a mountain of paper on the desk. And just systematizing that, you bear the burden of doing a conversion to systematize things so that there's a little more automation, a little more reliability, a little more sustainability. And the big thing, though, back to not to beat it to death, but the big thing is that owner needs to ask themselves, how many things do I touch every day? And who else could be doing that?
Yes, that very good point, Doug. And arguably the number one thing that would be the message for the audience to walk away with is, how involved is the owner in the business? That is one of the top 3 items that always gets addressed and looked at. And I'll tell you something else is, when I go in and work with an owner, the initial assessment that we work at, we don't focus on the business. That comes later. The very first thing we talk about, what are the owner's personal goals? Is it a sale? Is it a transition? Is it taking chips off the table? What are their personal goals that they want? Follow that by, okay, what's the financials it's going to take to achieve that? And if they're not quite sure, we'll leverage a wealth advisor or a financial advisor to come in. And I like to think of, my role is like a general contractor in a lot of ways, because depending on what the company needs and the owner needs, we may bring a lot of people, coaches, you name it, fractionals, etc. But then once we have the financial goals, we also talk about the business goals. So is it important to leave a legacy for the business? I've got business owners that have said, hey, these people have worked 15 years for me. I want to make sure they're taken care of. Well, you know what? Certain kind of buyers don't care about the employees. I've got other clients that have said, Rich, I've given employees a great job, great salary for the last 15 years. I think I've done my job for them. I want max value. Okay, that's probably a strategic buyer. And guess what? They may let go of your staff and do a roll-up, but that's fine. Those goals drive everything. And if you don't believe it, you go all the way through the preparation, they get ready for sale. Those things come back to the owner about ultimately what's important. It's not always about money. So we take that very seriously up front. We also do a very comprehensive assessment of the business, and the outcome of that will tell us how much it's impacting the value. And in doing so, to your point, it then helps us identify those areas that can be addressed in the shortest amount of time possible that provide the highest impact to the value. And if you're able to impact it, a couple of multiple points, then you can actually derive an ROI on the effort, because you're saying, hey, if it took the value from, say, 5 million to 5.5 million, okay, that's $500,000 value the owner is going to get for an initiative that may have cost them $25,000. And that's how we operate. We get at that level.
Yeah. Along that line, and another way to think about it, and again, speaking to those owners out there that might be listening to this, every business has common elements. You've got your product or service itself, the thing you're doing. You've got your people that support it. You've got your facilities and equipment that make it happen. You've got systems, you got financial controls, you got things like that. And every one of those can be bucketed for valuation. And you can ask yourself the question, how strong is my company in each of these areas? Yes. And for instance, one thing I run into a lot, you raised the point, a lot of times these companies say, well, look at my roster of employees. They've all been with me 15 years or more. Well, that undeniably is a strength. That means something is going well. And now, is it optimized just because they hung around? Well,
I'm glad you went there, Doug. That's exactly right. Good point.
You might have had Uncle Eddie on the payroll, and Eddie's not the right guy for the job, but you've been
Eddie's enjoyed
money.
15 years of being on the payroll. Yeah.
So, just looking at the tenure alone, the number may not be the right answer. You have to drill down a little deeper and do a little bit of a skills inventory to say, well, how many things do they know? Or if there's a business that involves licensing, like master electricians or plumbers, how many of your guys have that? And all of those other layers to each of those buckets helps determine that optimized value.
Yes. Well, you're right. And going back to an earlier point, once the business owner understands that, we're not in there to call the baby ugly. We're in there to identify a full 360. And I mean, it's very comprehensive, but to identify what are those things that will drive the highest value and what are those things that could impact the deal. And here's where so much of this exit planning up front, why it's so important. Because this analysis is going to be done during the due diligence phase of the sale. The buyers are very sophisticated. They've got bankers out there that can sniff out risk anywhere. And when you go under LOI and then you start the due diligence phase, they're going to ask all of these different questions. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that can kill a deal.
Yeah.
We do it a year or two in advance. So then those can be addressed. So when it goes through that aspect of the selling phase, it passes through like clockwork. And that in and of itself sends a powerful message to the buyer, to the bankers, and helps generate a much higher valuation for the company.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, back to the home sale analogy, when you put your house on the market and you get a contract with a prospective buyer, again, there's a kind of a due diligence that ensues. That buyer brings an inspector in and they look at all the systems and all the structures and all the mechanical parts of the house for safety and security. Depending on your local jurisdiction, you might have to have a termite inspection. You've got to have other things. An appraisal is done by a third-party appraiser that has an independent look at the value of the property. And to your point, the banker that's going to maybe fund the deal has all these criteria they look for to assess their risk in making the loan. And it's a very similar process for that business sale as well.
Yeah, very much so. And what I've seen, for example, is and the reason this message is a mission of mine to get this message out to business owners is that much of the ecosystem today wants them to sell because that's all they've known. You used the example earlier where let's say an owner wakes up one day and says, I'm tired. I've done a great job. I'm thinking about doing something with my business. And then all of a sudden they have coffee and their neighbor says, well, hey, I know a guy that sold for, 10 times EBITDA. Here, let me introduce you to the broker, the banker, the M&A team, or whoever, because that's what they know. And frankly, it's not bad, but that's also going right to the sale. And if you hadn't prepared, it's like putting your house on the market and all of the dirty laundry is still sitting there. And you didn't know any better. You just said, hey, it's my house. Somebody will appreciate it. We're educating the market that says before you make a decision of this magnitude, consider educating yourself and planning for it. So at least you know and have a good third-party evaluation that says, hey, if you did put it on the market today, here's a very good shot of what it would sell for, or if it would sell, and then the challenges that would come up. And then you have at least a choice to say, do we want to address it and get it where it needs to be so the value is there, or do we go ahead and take our chances?
Yeah. And not to be a fearmonger or anything, I think part of the message here is to say to owners, start considering this early. Don't wait till you get to that goal line and say, I need to sell my business. And I've known people, they get the terrible bad news that they or their spouse or a family member have a bad, medical condition that's not going to bode well. And so now they're in this panic of, I can't do the business anymore. I need to move on. And that's almost, I'll use the word dumping it on the market. And you really don't get the opportunity to maximize that value. So, today is the day to start thinking about what an exit could look like. And that's actually true for younger entrepreneurs. I do a lot of work with those that are late 30s, 40 somethings that have just started buying businesses. And I talk to them about, once you acquire the business and you kind of get it stabilized, immediately leapfrog to that potential end game. And to your point, Rich, factor in your goals and your own personal vision about where you want to be when you turn 50 or 55 or 60. What do you want it to look like? And you've got all kinds of runway to solve backwards and say, well, now I see the plan. Here's what I need to accomplish in this business to get there.
Yeah. It's your point earlier. Everyone is going to exit their business at some time.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to die, right? And actually, there's a stat out there that says about 50% of exits are forced. Death, divorce, disagreement, distress of some kind, financial, mental distress, etc., disability kind of things. So it's going to happen. So do you proactively think in the context of, is it solely generating income for the business? Or is it creating a business based on transferable value? So when that phone call comes in, because everyone's had it. I got called yesterday. Somebody wanted to, talk about buying my business. And most business owners have had that. How do you know if it's a good offer or not? If you're ready when that comes in, you can really take advantage. Same thing if something happens with your business or yourself. The 5Ds, as we call it, 50% of businesses close. You've already prepared for that, and you can take advantage and max exit whenever it's on your timing. And what we're talking about is not anything that's, a worthless effort. This is all about just making a well-run business that generates that is based upon the value of the company. And it's just good, solid business sense to run it that way.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about the timing of it. I'm working with an entrepreneur now who is in the buyer game, and he's a smart guy and energized, and he started doing his own shopping for businesses. He was looking around in his market, and he literally was just like going down the phone book or the Google listings of businesses of certain types, found one that sounded appealing. He drove by, he liked what he saw. He did some more research. He got the owner's home address and went and knocked on the door.
Yeah.
Didn't call, but went and knocked on the door and introduced himself and said, "Is there any chance you've been thinking about selling that business? Best I can." And he had all these stats already that he had been able to find through common public sources. He said, "You've been founded for 20 years and you've been there on that street corner and da da da." And so he was prepped with the story. And the owner was dazzled, and he said, "As a matter of fact, I have been thinking about that." And he said, "Why don't you come in? Let's have a drink and let's talk about this." And he's under LOI right now for that business.
Good for him. No, keep going. Sorry.
Well, in as it has unfolded, sure enough, that owner has done a pretty good job of optimizing all things in his business over time. And whether he had an advisor or he just figured it out, I don't know. But he's a guy that, he's loyal to his employees. He wants their legacy to continue. Those are some of his personal values. This buyer candidate said, "That's what I'm here for. I'm not a private equity guy. I'm an independent operator. I'm just at a stage in life. I want to do this, and I respect and appreciate the legacy you've built, and I want to be the guy that can help carry it on," and yada yada yada. And they've struck it off. They've got a great working relationship. The due diligence is just clipping along very well because the owner has nothing to hide. He's got all his financials prepared. He's current on his taxes. Everything is ready to go. What do you want to know? Well, that's chapter 3 in my book here, and pull out the ring binder, and that's what you want? Okay, here you go. And so, it was a win-win all the way around for sure.
That I'm glad you shared that, because not every business and circumstance is doom and gloom. I've got a client that we finish up the initial phase, like I shared a little bit earlier, and the valuation came in great, and the scoring and all the assessment came in great. And I looked at him and said, "You know what? I only see about 3 months worth of work here. Let's get this couple of things squared away. And then after that, let's go ahead and call, whether it's a broker or an M&A, and get that process going." Now, what we also do is I also share, all right, now it's time, we need to get you with an estate planning attorney, because you're about to have a nice windfall from your business, and we need to plan for tax strategies. We need to plan for how you're going to invest it afterwards, because all this needs to be done up front. You don't want to sell a business. The second you sell it and the check comes in, Uncle Sam's going to get his 40%. You set this up in advance so you have entities in place and you've got tax strategies. And see, that's part of what we talk about when we say it's the whole scenario and the whole person, but he's in a great shape. I got another example where family-owned business that's looking at succession planning, and we've been working together for a year, and we're not making the progress that we should be making, and we're looking at alternatives. Does it mean we sell it to a third party? Do we bring somebody else in to run the company and give the next generation more time? I mean, there's a lot of options that can be explored, but you got to start in advance. And, you can't wait to the last minute and hope that the rainbow full of gold is going to fall in your lap.
If I may, on that generational transfer thing, I had a young lady, she's local to my market. She runs a big moving and storage company. and it's a generational thing. She's the daughter of the original founder and owner. And as the story goes, this man is rocking along running this business, and she, grows up, goes to school, and comes back, and he says, "Need you to help me in the business." So she joins. And she kind of, does the classic, works in the warehouse a little while, then drives a truck for a little while, and then, moves on up and becomes like the COO of the business. And she finally has her fill of working for Dad, and says, "I got to go. I'm going to go do my own thing, spread my own wings." Well, I forget the exact timing, but not long after that, the owner was presented with a petition from all of the staff. It was handwritten and said, "If she doesn't come back, we quit."
Wow, no kidding.
And so he invited her over for dinner and presented and showed her this list. And he said, "We have to start talking about you coming back." He said, "But I'll sweeten the deal. I will go away. I will be the one to go away, but I want you to be the one to take it over." And he and his wife had signed the petition and handed it to her.
Yeah. Wow.
And she's got it framed in her office now. In fact, if you go to my archive and look her up, you can see the petition hung on the wall in the background. And she's had the business now for, 6 or 7 years, I think, but, going gangbusters with it. And she took it. She took it and did about a 10x growth in the business, with her ideas, and once she had full control of it. But, and I don't say that. I mean, the story speaks for itself, what you can make of it, what you will about the owner founder, but, he had obviously kind of gotten of age and possibly wasn't real receptive to employee ideas anymore, and just tired and kind of worn out, and, not going to do anything new and different, all of that going on. So
that's one of the hardest things, Doug, is when the owner gets to that point and they're just tired and they're worn out. And a lot of times what will happen is sales will drop off, and you can tell there's no longer the energy and the excitement to run the business. And that's when they say, "Okay, yeah, I'm tired. I'm not doing as well as I used to. I want to sell it." It's the worst time to sell.
Right.
Because people don't buy companies for declining sales. That's a liquidation or a fire sale. They buy companies that have upward growth and trajectory and additional capacity. And the buyer is like, "Hey, I'm not just buying it today. I've got future plans for it."
Right.
And so I hate this scenario, because when they no longer have the energy, then it's really hard to regain that.
Right.
Whereas 2, 3, 5 years in advance, give yourself enough time for just, man, we're going to get a good shot. We're going to get this thing where it needs to be. It's going to be well run. And then we're going to look at life thereafter. Right. That's a great success story.
Yep. Well, Rich, we're about up on time for today, man. Really appreciate you sitting in and sharing all these things. Tell the folks the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more.
I would hit the website, which has all this information that we've talked about today. And there's guides that you can download and things, especially for business owners, as well as advisors in the exit planning process. So website is richhallgroup.com. And if you'd like to reach out more, fill in the contact form. It'll send it directly to me, and I'll respond within 24 hours.
Awesome. Well, as always, folks, we'll have those links in the show notes, and you can hop over there and check it out. But one last time, Rich, thanks for sitting in, buddy.
Thanks for having me. Hope you have a great day, Doug.
All right, you too. Well, folks, with that, we are going to sign off, wrap this up, say goodbye. But I do like to remind you, we got a video version of this over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives. We just blew past episode number 300. Real happy and proud of that. But we celebrated for a minute, and we're moving on to 500. So looking forward to that milestone next. But in the meantime, thank you very much for hanging in. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.